in overturning the Spanish government after the Madrid train bombings, and yet then tried to go on and create even greater damage after achieving their goals.
That's exactly it. And that's why these messages, and that's why when people call them propaganda, that's exactly what they are. When al-Qaeda states it has a grievance because of Israel, okay, and a lot of Muslims would agree with it, and a lot of non-Muslims would agree with it, does it mean that once Israel disappears, that that's going to bring peace between a group like al-Qaeda and radicals and the West? He would imply yes, but these writings show otherwise. And going back to what you were saying, you're right. You know, for his original big complaint, and he wrote a fatwa in 1996 about it, was basically U.S. forces in the peninsula.
Right.
But then that ended, and he came up with new ones. And if you'll see in the book, his complaints range from, like I said, the usual Israel and stuff like that, to something you would never expect from him. For example, he complains about the U.S. for not signing the Kyoto Protocol.
I know, he's such an environmentalist.
Yeah, exactly. He tells the U.S. how it abuses and exploits their women. And whether there's some truth in that or not, it's amazing coming from his worldview of women.
Know, I'm constantly surprised by these, you know, these stances he takes about American politics.
Right.
But his own politics are so obscure. You can, you know, the Harmony documents, which American and coalition troops captured after the Tora Bora raids and so on in 2001. Thousands and thousands of pages. One of my sources said that they were soaked in kerosene, but the guy that was in charge of destroying them ran away before he lit the match. But you know, they have the al-Qaeda constitution and their employment contract, many pages of military manuals and so on, but not a single page of politics, their stances on different political things that are essential to understanding any political movement, which leads me to think that it's not really a political movement at all, because it doesn't, we don't even know what kind of economic model he follows. Is he a Marxist or a Keynesian? Do you see any...
I see exactly what you're saying, but see, that's what you're doing there, and what I would do, and what a lot of people are doing, is we're applying kind of a Western epistemology on how to handle these problems. But with him, it's one simple word: Sharia law. Sharia law, which has been articulated and fixed over the course of 1,400 years, as an answer for everything.
But yeah, his own country has Sharia law. What's his complaint?
Well, but the monarchy, by letting those infidels come and live around the holy temples, proved that they're obviously infidels, because Muhammad said you have to expel Christians and Jews from the peninsula, and there shall not be two religions on my homeland and stuff like that.
That's what he said allegedly on his deathbed. But at that time, there were Christians and Jews all over the Arabian
But Omar did expel them.
Yes, he did.
And he's a righteous caliph.
Yes,
for
one of the four.
And other things.
You mentioned Israel. How important is Israel to the theology and of al-Qaeda? How central is it?
Well, there's two ways to look at Israel. There's the way that we would understand, which is basic, and what a lot of Muslims would agree with, which is that Israel, according to the Muslim worldview, is an oppressive entity, and it's usurped Palestinian land, and it's oppressing them. Now that, I believe, in and of itself can be addressed and can be handled. And I'm personally not saying either or, which is right or wrong. That's, I believe, an issue that should be addressed. But the problem is then when you find through these writings that the Jews are condemned and damned if they do, damned if they don't. So in other words, even if Israel ceased to exist, based solely on theology, the Jews are still enemies. They have to always be attacked until they are dhimmis, second-class citizens under the Islamic scheme of things. And so that's the point. You know, one outdoes the other. One is temporal, which is talking about Israel as in the now. But the other transcends time and space, and it makes it more important because it has nothing to do with circumstances. It's a fixed commandment from God, the way it's understood by Muslims. When the verses say, for example, verse 929, which is a very famous verse, and it's said to have abrogated so many of the more peaceful and tolerant verses, basically says, fight those people from among the book, the people of the book, the Jews and Christians, who do not believe in Allah and who do not believe in His Prophet, and who do not uphold Allah's laws and forbid what Allah has forbidden and what His Prophet has forbidden. In other words, who don't follow Sharia law, and who do not practice the true religion until they pay the jizya, tribute, with willing submission and feel themselves utterly subdued. Now look at the word, until. It didn't say until they stop attacking you. It didn't say until Israel ceases to be. It says, until they pay tribute and live under your suzerainty in submission. So to many Muslims, that right there, that's fixed on high. That's not something that can just be pushed aside. And that's the problem. See, if Israel really is at fault, and let's say it is guilty, in my opinion, based on the theology, which is always hostile, you know, why should it not be that way? Because it's already an enemy no matter what it does. It's already condemned. So why would you expect, and not just Israel, the West in general, the whole world, the non-Muslim world, why should you give in to any concessions, even if they are legitimate, if you're also told at the same time you are our enemies no matter what, until you give in to one of the three choices: become a Muslim, live under our authority, or fight to the death. And that is a very well codified worldview in Islamic law, in Sharia law. That's not something that's open to debate or interpretation. Perhaps you've heard of it, the abode of Islam and the abode of war, which are always fighting perpetually.
But there is a middle ground.
Yeah, there's some jurists, not all, say there's the abode of treaties.
And bin Laden has spoken of this in his offer to Europe, for instance.
He's offered treaties, but under Islamic law, these treaties don't abrogate the concept that the two must always fight. In other words, you can have a treaty with infidels or non-Muslims. Under Islamic law, it shouldn't exceed 10 years. And you only do that when you yourself are in an extremely weakened position. So if anything, when he did offer those treaties, that was a very telling sign that al-Qaeda was waning in power, because why would it make peace with infidels if it's as strong as it likes to claim?
Now you concentrate on the writings and speeches of two men, Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri, the number 2 man in al-Qaeda, and in many respects the chief propagandist, the brains behind the organization. What do you, in analyzing their writings, how do they divide up the duties? What is bin Laden's job and what is Zawahiri's job?
From what I've seen, bin Laden's job, they're both propagandists. I mean, we see their videos come out, and Zawahiri, I mean, I think last year he came out with like 15 videos.
24.
24, back to back. So, he has a lot of time doing this stuff. So they both engage in the propaganda. I think, though, that bin Laden is much more the symbolic kind of, future caliph, and he's the charismatic leader. He's, well composed. He has his long beard, which is black now. And he's also the money man, and he's the Saudi, or he's an Arabian, so he's actually related to the Prophet in that sense. He's from the peninsula, whereas Zawahiri is Egyptian. But Zawahiri, and what you'll see in here, he's the man who actually, like you said, he's the ideologue. He's the one that puts together the treatises, the fatwas, and he combines them. So there's 3 documents here, for example: Loyalty and Enmity, which is about 70 pages, and this is compiled, written by Ayman Zawahiri. The reason I say compiled, because more than half of it are just the statements from the Quran and from the Hadith and from the most authoritative Islamic theologians. And he's also written showing how democracy and Sharia law are antithetical. And it's a total condemnation of democracy and how it can never work with Islam. And the troubling thing about these, though, is, like I said, when you read them, it's not even their words. See, the propaganda, it's their words. When you read the theology, some of it is their words, but it's all based on the words of the Quran, which are clear-cut. They're not. Some things in the Quran are ambiguous, but some things aren't. Like that verse I quoted, 929. It just says, fight them until they live under submission. So, now, for example, the loyalty and enmity, that one is dedicated to showing how Muslims must at all times maintain loyalty to fellow Muslims, even if they're cruel to them, and how at all times they must maintain enmity and hatred and disavowal towards non-Muslims. Did I say at first that they're supposed to have loyalty to non-Muslims? Loyalty to Muslims. Loyalty to Muslims, and enmity and disavowal to non-Muslims. And it's a very long treatise. It's about 70 pages. But when you look at it, and for example, I'll quote just, the heart of it circulates around several Quranic verses. For example, these are all Quranic verses. O you who have believed, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are but friends of each other. And whoever amongst